There we go. Hi, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of Two Opinionated, where once again I am flying solo without my partner in crime, Brett. He is under strict quarantine. We're all under a little bit of quarantine, but he's fighting through some stuff, so hopefully he'll be able to join us again real soon. But in the meantime, I am so excited that I have a real astrophysicist with us today, Dr. Erin Macdonald. So welcome, Erin.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yes, different times. I hope your partner in crime recovers soon, but sending the best.
He's pretty tough, so I think he's
Good.
already kind of chomping at the bit to get back out there. So that's usually a good sign when they're younger.
Yeah, that's fair.
Recovering.
Definitely.
We expect him back pretty soon. But yeah, so I'm so thrilled. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this for such a long time because you aren't just a consultant for Star Trek, but you're so involved, I think, or so into a lot of the science fiction type of shows that we love on Two Opinionated. So it's really fun when you get somebody that's geeky, but also has turned it into kind of a career. So that's really exciting.
Absolutely. No, thank you. I take any opportunity I can to geek out about science fiction. I am one of us.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, if you don't mind, take a minute and kind of introduce yourself to our listeners and to our viewers on YouTube, and let us know a little bit about what you do and how you got into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I'm an astrophysicist. I did my PhD in general relativity with the LIGO collaboration, searching for gravitational waves. This was a while ago. It was at the University of Glasgow. I did leave academia and LIGO about a year before they made their Nobel Prize winning discovery. It's fine. As I was kind of leaving academia, I love teaching. So I got into teaching. I taught at museums and community college.
Yeah.
And then started teaching at conventions, at pop culture conventions, talking about the science behind science fiction. And that's kind of become my thing. And lately I moved out to LA. And as you mentioned, I do consulting for Star Trek. So I'm the franchise science consultant right now, which is a dream awesome. Come true.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And yeah, I produce content online for people trying to use science fiction to teach science, which is something I'm really passionate about.
Yeah, that's really commendable, and I think a neat avenue to kind of take something that so many people love, especially younger people, and trying to actually teach them a little bit about science and probably inspire some of them to get into science, which is amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. If I can even just inspire one kid or one person, I mean, I feel like I've done my job. So
yeah. So when you started getting into this line of work, what was the first science fiction thing that you looked at and tried to turn it into real science?
Yeah, that's a good question. This goes way back. This goes to me as a PhD student procrastinating writing my PhD thesis.
That never happened.
I know. And I happened to be watching a lot of Voyager because Janeway was kind of a mentor for me. And I burnt out. I wanted to give up. I'm wondering if it's all worth it. And so Voyager was kind of keeping me on my track. And then my brain was like, you're getting your PhD in general relativity. I bet you could figure out how warp drive works.
Yeah.
So for those people who don't know, general relativity is that idea of space-time, that fabric of space-time, the bowling ball and the trampoline thing. And so figuring that out, figuring how warp drive would work, that just kind of took off from there.
That's pretty much, you could be the Ephraim Cochrane.
You know what though? Like, I've done the math. I'll let some engineers figure that out.
Yeah, that's right. Well, so is it possible?
Yeah, I mean, that's the coolest thing, because the whole point of traveling through our universe, we're limited by the speed of light because it has to do with our mass on the surface of space-time bends it. Right. The lighter we are, the less it bends. And then when you have no mass, you just coast in a straight line at the speed of light. And you can't go faster than that. But nothing says space-time itself can't go faster than the speed of light. And so this idea of a warp bubble, you build a bubble of space-time around your ship, and then that propels you faster than the speed of light while you keep normal physics where your ship is at. So yeah, it works. The theory's great.
That's pretty good. How'd I do? Did my eyes stay, focused?
Yeah.
I wasn't glazed over or anything? That was good.
No,
that's really good. I love that because you actually broke it down in a way that I think people could understand, which is a lot of the reason people struggle, I think, with science and math is it's difficult to relate to someone that doesn't just have a predisposition to be good at that.
For sure. And that's why I think using science fiction is so helpful, because, a lot of people who teach science have degrees in it and they already had a predisposition. And a lot of times they have a hard time explaining it without the math.
Right.
And for me, I can use science fiction as a reference to say, whether something is accurate or not, it can still be a teaching moment to say, well, this is why that wouldn't be the case. And then without the math, explain the physics behind that. And so it's definitely making it more accessible to people.
Yeah, I think that's terrific. And I saw something when I was kind of going through your stuff, which is amazing. And we'll make sure to give out the website and everything before we leave. You got into kind of the Star Trek stuff a little later than a lot of us did. Like I started with the original series when I was probably preteen and kind of went up through all of them. I was doing Next Generation in college, and then Voyager and Deep Space Nine and all those. But you came to it just a little bit later.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't grow up with it necessarily. My parents weren't big science fiction fans. I really liked it. My uncle exposed me to a lot of science fiction, but I never really came across Star Trek until I was in college. And I always joke around that, I was getting a physics degree, and there's a big intersection in physicists and Star Trek fans. Yep. So it was just kind of through my friends and through that being part of the embedded culture in the physics department. And my passion for it really grew. And then the night the Kelvin reboot, like the 2009 Star Trek film came out actually the night we all graduated. And so we graduated, and then we all went down to go see the midnight showing. And that was my first exposure to like the Star Trek fandom and fandom in general, actually, that in person. I hadn't really gone to conventions before. And
it's a different animal.
It is a different animal. And I was like, oh, this is where I belong. These are my people.
These are people. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah. When I was in college, I opened up a couple of comic book stores, and that was my kind of first, I was like, I love this. I'm going to do it. And, I was just amazed to find, other people that were so into that sort of thing. Of course, if you went to conventions back then, you didn't have the celebrities or anything. You had writers and artists for comic books, and that was it. And luckily that has expanded now to where it's including, so many different genres and different occupations. You've got women involved, which you didn't really have, 30 or 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's pretty amazing. And by and large, it's good people. They're fun people to hang around with. So
absolutely. It becomes a family. And that's been the exciting thing for me is I started giving talks at DragonCon about 10 years ago. And DragonCon has a dedicated science and space track. They have 2 tracks on that are dedicated, panels about space and science. And they're hugely popular. And so I started taking these talks to other conventions, and that whole educational component of Comic-Cons just grew. It skyrocketed. And it's really exciting to get to see that.
Yeah, I watched not sure what you would call it, but the panel, I guess, that you did on the Scully effect.
Oh, yeah.
That was. Can you talk about that for a minute? Because that was such a unique angle, and I thought really inspirational, especially to young women.
Yeah, thank you for watching that. That was that was an event this past, I think about a year ago. It was through AT&T Shape, which is an event that AT&T holds about technology in the entertainment industry. And they invited me to host a panel. I can't even get the sentence out without fangirling. To host a panel with Geena Davis and Mayim Bialik. And Mayim Bialik is from The Big Bang Theory. And a lot of people know this, but she, plays Amy Farrah Fowler in the show, and the actress herself has a PhD in neurosciences.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what field, but so our panel was about entertainment inspiring people to go into sciences. And the Scully effect is something that has been talked about for a long time anecdotally. This idea that the character Dana Scully really did have an impact on people my age to go into science, because she was just a strong, awesome woman in science. And we saw ourselves in her. And Geena Davis has this Geena Davis Institute for Gender and Media.
Right.
And she commissioned a whole study, an actual scientific study into the Scully effect, to try to see statistically if there was a difference between people who did watch the X-Files and versus people who didn't, and whether they were more likely to go into a STEM field. And they found a statistically significant portion of people who watched the X-Files went into science. And I myself, I was obsessed with Dana Scully. Like, I can't even convey how deep my obsession went, because I was a little redheaded girl and I loved space and aliens, and this cool woman was just rocking it in pantsuits and lab coats, and like, she was just the coolest. So it's amazing to see how much of a generational effect that's had in our culture.
Yeah, no, I watched that and I thought, well, this is really great. And you had such a good rapport with both of the ladies you had on the panel, and I thought that was it made me think. I was like, I bet she'd have made a good guest on Big Bang. You could have been like her scientist friend.
Right. It was funny, because I hadn't met either of them, and Geena Davis is like a goddess. she's not she's not touchable.
Right.
She was incredibly friendly and kind, and I was very happy with how the conversation went. But it was funny with Mayim Bialik, like, we had never met before. There's a few years between us, but there was something about both having gone through the sciences, dealt with academia, chose to leave, working in the entertainment industry. We just really connected, and we had a very similar rapport with each other. I was very proud of it. I was very proud of that event. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was fun to watch, and people should definitely check that out. And I know it's on your website. Do you want to go ahead and give the website?
Yeah. So my website, it's erinpmacdonald.com or drerinmac.com, erinmac.com. We'll take you there. And you can also just search for it directly on YouTube. It's the AT&T shaped Scully effect. And that'll take you right to it. It came up real
easy.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to find. And the whole panel is up there. So.
Yeah. It's. I started by watching clips, and I was like, "Well, there's the whole thing."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's great. It was a really good discussion. I was really proud of it.
Yeah, I always admired Geena Davis, because she's such a good actress, and she's an advocate, but she's also, if I remember right, she's like an Olympic level archer.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah, she competed in the Olympics in archery. Like, yeah. She's just amazing. She's amazing.
It's pretty amazing. So that's pretty good. So are you watching the Star Trek Picard season?
I am. Yeah, I wasn't involved in season 1, so I'm watching it along with everyone else.
Well, what do you think so far?
It's been good. It's been interesting. It's a different type of story. I was talking about this with a couple of friends that Star Trek is not really. It's never used AI as necessarily villains, without going into too much detail.
Right.
But it's always seen that artificial intelligence, there's like whole episodes of TNG about Data and how he's got autonomy and he's a character and he's a person. And, but it's very common in other science fiction. So I feel like it's kind of, and it might be great to bring in more fans of Star Trek by using that as a vessel where people are seeing stories that they're familiar with, that are like Dune, like Mass Effect, like a lot of other stories,
right?
To make it a little more relatable. But it's just been interesting for me to see that.
Yeah, I've a couple of things I really have. I've enjoyed it. I think it's great seeing the X cast back on the show, and even some of the minor ones, that they've brought in. That's been great, and I think seeing that interaction, you can tell they have a real affection for each other. That's for a fan. That's sure nice. But I love the way they've taken Jean-Luc Picard's character and softened him up. They've made him vulnerable, and they're not trying to take this older gentleman and have him do these amazing things that he would have done 20 or 30 years ago. They've kind of said, well, he is older and he can't do all those things. And they've kind of went from it that angle. And that surprised me a little bit, but I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's been good. And the funny thing is it does feel a little bit more like a sequel to Voyager than necessarily a sequel to TNG, just in dealing with the Borg and dealing with all of that. But it's been great. I think seeing Hugh again was fantastic because he's a great character.
That. Yeah,
he's a great character.
He's one that I think everybody liked when he was on, but he wasn't on for very long. So seeing him, it was like, oh, that was a big one when he came.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we're recording this before the finale airs. They have a lot to wrap up in one episode.
Oh yeah.
So
I don't think they get it wrapped up.
I don't know. I
think there's a cliffhanger coming.
I'm sure.
Supposedly next season we get Geena and a few other people coming from the old show. So if I had worked with him, I'd probably be sitting by the phone. Like,
right?
Everybody else on there.
Exactly. Oh man.
But yeah, so that's been really good. I wanted to ask you. Let me look because I wrote it down. I don't want to get the name wrong. One of the things that you had explained on your, I don't know what Dr. Erin Explains the Universe.
That's my YouTube channel. Yeah.
That's your YouTube channel. And it's wonderful. So one of the ones that I watched that I really liked was on gravitational time dilation.
Awesome.
Right? Can you explain that? Because I at the time I followed along, but once I turned it off, I was like, wait a minute.
That's all right. That's why conventions keep inviting me back, and even to give the same talks, because they're like, people pick up something new every time.
That's right.
So gravitational time dilation, we see in a lot of science fiction. It's this idea that if you have a gravity well, an object like a planet or a black hole or a star, it dips space-time like that bowling ball on the trampoline image.
Yes. Okay.
And part of that is I'm using the word space-time because Einstein and general relativity treats space and time as one fabric, a four-dimensional fabric. And so time is getting warped as well as space. When we're trying to launch stuff off of the surface, we're trying to crawl out of that gravitational well. But if you're deep in a gravitational well as opposed to sort of outside, time is actually going slower for you than for someone outside the gravitational well. You can think of it just being like deep and slowed down. And this is actually the only practical application we have of general relativity because GPS satellites experience time slightly faster than we do. And it's tiny, it's fractions and fractions of seconds, but it's enough to, pinpoint your location with better accuracy. And so we mostly have seen this. I think the most popular example in science fiction was in Interstellar. Right. That's usually the one people reference the most. That's when they were visiting the planet around the black hole, I believe. And it was like they experienced half an hour to like 7 years or something like that. And so that was an extreme example of gravitational time dilation. But that is something that we see. And it's really cool.
Yeah. It was something that I had seen before, but never knew what it was, what to call it. And so when I saw that episode on Dr. Erin, it was really good. I mean, I was like, aha, with that because there was, you have to help me. Was there a Voyager episode?
There was, yeah. It was called Blink of an Eye. Yeah.
Blink of an Eye. Yeah. Yeah.
It's one of my favorite episodes. It's
that's
so
probably the what tickled me on it, because the first thing that I was like, I think this sounds familiar.
Yeah. That's when Voyager gets caught in the gravitational well of a planet, and they're actually experiencing time reversed. Like they're experiencing it faster on the planet than Voyager is orbiting it. But they actually explain it scientifically correctly. And I won't get into too many details, but they explain themselves out of it brilliantly.
Yeah. I love when shows do that, because not all of them do. No. And not that most of us would know, but it's, it adds it kind of makes it authentic when they can talk. Big Bang does a lot of that. When they're talking, they don't do it much because they don't go real deep into stuff. But when they throw something in, you're like, that sounds right. They probably
exactly.
sounds like they know what they're talking about.
And as a consultant who works with a lot of writers on how to get the science right, there are a lot of times where they want, the writers will want something in the story that is not very scientific. And we find it's much easier to just not explain it than to try to explain it and get into trouble. And sometimes that's the way you do. But if you are able to embed some actual science in it, that's awesome. I think a lot of people pick up on that.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And I think I saw, or maybe you mentioned it earlier, but you got to meet Kate Mulgrew.
I did, yeah.
What was that
that's
like?
A picture behind me.
Yes, yeah, I see it. What was that like?
It was amazing. It was beautiful and awkward and beautiful because I was a guest at the same convention she was at, and I'd been on the convention circuit for like 5 or 6 years at that point, and we had just never crossed conventions. But in my PhD thesis, as I mentioned, I watched a lot of Voyager to kind of keep me going. And I wrote in the dedication to Captain Janeway because I would have given up if it weren't for her. And so when I was at this convention, I was like, just please don't schedule me on top of her. Just please don't schedule me on top of her. And I had enough time free when she was doing autographs, and I brought my thesis with me and traveled with it. And I stood in line with everyone else, and I got up to her and I showed her the thesis page. And I was like, this is my dissertation in astrophysics, and I was wondering if you could sign it. And she was just like, what? That's huge. And then it's huge for me because I'm meeting her for the first time. And so there was a lot of feelings. It was really good.
I know. That's amazing. I love it. That's what makes, I think, conventions so great. Yeah. And I'll say most of the actors that work those, they get it. Not all do, but most get it, and they get that. I mean, almost every person coming up to you has got, they're a fan, and there's something that this means so much to them. So it's important that they take that minute or 2 minutes to connect, and most of them do. They're really great. Yeah, I'm sure it's exhausting.
Yeah, it's and I've been so lucky now for so long, especially, I've been doing stuff for Star Trek, not as the consultant, but giving talks at conventions for a few years now. So I've been lucky enough to get to know a lot of the cast and just name drop left and right. But but it has been great. And the ones that you do see regularly at conventions, I mean, a lot of them really do just genuinely want to be there and enjoy the interactions. And it's great. I love it.
Yeah, it's really cool. I saw, and I wanted to ask you about it. You were on one of the Star Trek cruises.
Yes.
Yeah, you have to tell me about that because I get the emails all the time. You got to join it. And I was like, that sounds pretty good.
I know. So it was just a couple weeks ago we got back. It was my second time going. I had gone the year previously. And when I was invited for the previous one, the first time I had gone, I had never been on a cruise. I had never been on a Star Trek cruise. I had no idea what to expect. I was freaking out. And it was such a unique experience because it's like a convention, except it's twice as long and 1/10 of the people. And so you get so much more. So the first year I kind of was just giving the talks I usually give and just kind of feeling my way around the situation. Right. But this past year, because I kind of understood the vibe of it, I mean, it just took off that because the actors and the talent, we are able to think out of the box because you're programming basically a convention for a week with not that many people. That was kind of
my question is, how do you do that? How much content can you have?
You get so much weird, fun, quirky stuff out of it. Like John Delancey, he writes these plays, and so he brings his plays and they do readings, and Denise Crosby hosts a bad lip reading of original series episodes, and awesome. Like Mary Chiefo taught an improv class, and I did a whiskey tasting, and Nana Visitor does like a food class, and so it's a lot more accessible, and you do feel a bit more like a family by the end of it. And some actors are just out with everyone else, having a good time. Right. Others, are doing their events and then they kind of go and take some time to themselves, which is completely understandable.
Yes.
But you do really start to bond with people on the cruise, and it's a blast. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think that's on my bucket list. I'd like to try that out.
It's worth keeping on the radar for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I definitely feel pretty good. I saw that, and you've got such a great speaking voice, and I saw that you did a little bit of stuff with gaming and some voiceovers.
Yeah, so this is something that I started doing back when I was a postdoc, because after my PhD, I kind of crawled out of the fog and realized that I hadn't really interacted with non-scientists in a few years. And so I signed up for an acting class, and this was in Cardiff, and it was for adults who were trying to transition careers. And so it was a really good intensive working like actors workshop. And from that, I really found a passion for voice acting and started doing it kind of as a hobby. Since then it's grown a little bit, but it's always just been something on my radar that I'm really passionate about. I really like the ability, I feel like through that acting training, I was able to kind of cross that threshold of feeling like a trained actor, that I could confidently do that. And making that transition and then learning how to do that behind the microphone is fantastic. And last year I had the opportunity to record some of my talks, my Science of Science Fiction, with the teaching company and put them up on Audible. So it's called The Science of Sci-Fi. And I wrote and recorded the whole thing, and it was professionally done. It was, they produced it, and I was really proud of that. So
yeah, that's awesome. Did you go in studio, or do you have like a closet at the house that you're hiding in to do?
So here, most of the time I have my closet studio upstairs, and it works great. You get a good microphone, you get some drop cloths, like you can set up a pretty good studio. But this one was like, I did fly to where the teaching company was, and we recorded it as a group with a producer in a sound booth. And it was like a 2-day marathon to record a 10-hour audio session. It was a lot, but it was great. I had a good time doing it.
Yeah. We get to talk to a lot of voiceover actors, and we've talked to some that just do the Audible books, and that's not an easy profession. So kudos.
I think. Yeah, no, thank you. I have recorded books before as narrators. They are rough. They are marathons. Yeah. It is not a sprint. It is. No,
it's kind of exhausting. I mean, it's tiring just reading on your own if you do it for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. And try reading out loud. Because the other trick too is that a lot of people can sustain for a long time reading out loud, but you have to sustain the enthusiasm and the momentum, and you have to make it interesting, and you have to be aware of when you start to get bored, you're listening to yourself, that the reader is going to get bored. So it's definitely difficult. I really tip my hat to anyone who does audiobook recordings, because it's tough.
For sure. Have you thought about, or are you writing your own science fiction type script? Have you thought about getting into that?
Because I've tried writing novels before, and I've never been great at it. It's like I try and then give up really fast because I'm just out of my depth and I'm not feeling it. But the more I've worked with screenwriters and writers in the entertainment industry and TV and movies, that is a medium I'm actually very comfortable in. And I've been so lucky as a consultant because I get to interact with 3 or 4 different writers' rooms at the same time, each with their own half a dozen writers. And so I get to see a lot of styles, and that's where I've actually learned I'm very comfortable in. And so, I'm starting to put some stuff together because I have had those stories in my mind. I just haven't had the right medium to actually tell them. So, as I start to grow and get more confident with it, I think inspiration strikes. Right now I'm working on a screenplay that's a little bit less science fiction, but more based on what it's like being a woman in science. And it just kind of hit me one day that I was like, oh, that's the story I want to tell. So,
you should tell that one.
Thank you. I'm very excited about it. I feel like I finally got that inspiration that I was looking for a long time.
Yeah, that's great. And when you're ready for proofreaders, we're right here.
Thank you. I will be calling everyone.
So I need to let you go pretty soon, but my son Brett would shoot me if I didn't ask you about Star Wars, because he could care less about Star Trek, but huge Star Wars fan. So what can you give me Star Wars related?
Well, I am wearing a Leia shirt, so
yeah, there you go.
So this is not out of my depth. I'm wearing Star Trek socks on a Leia shirt.
All right. You've even. I keep telling him you can like both.
You can like both. You can. I currently have a bit of a competition with the tattoos on my body about half Star Wars, half Star Trek. But it's fun. There's not a lot of science that's given in Star Wars, but there's a lot of science that can be taught with it. Right. I actually started incorporating science fiction when I was a professor, by using Star Wars as an example, because we were studying exoplanets and everyone was sort of glazed over. And this is planets around other star systems. And I was like, well, that one we just discovered, that's like Tatooine because it has 2 suns. And then the whole class they were like, wait, but so could that be real? And they started asking questions like a scientist, even though it was about Star Wars, they were being inquisitive and asking the type of questions we wanted to ask. So Star Wars, I think, is a great example of like mining the content to there's so much of it and it's so well known that even though there's not a lot of like known science behind lightsabers, there's still a lot we can talk about how lasers work, the difference between light and plasma and crystals and like all of that sort of thing. There's still a lot there that we can unpack. So I have fun with it.
Yeah, that's pretty good, and he'll enjoy that because I know you've got stuff out there on it, so you can.
I do, and I've definitely like headcanoned how the hyperdrive works in Star Wars. Like, they've never, based on the little nuggets that they've given us, I've tried.
Well, that's kind of like a warp drive. I mean,
it is. It's basically like it builds a wormhole as it's traveling through it. And actually, I was reading the recent Thrawn books by Timothy Zahn, and he describes it pretty similarly. So,
yeah, I'm glad you brought those up because I finally got Brett reading those. Which, my opinion, that should have been the sequel we got was the Thrawn trilogy.
Those were good. I was very disappointed to not, because I did like the sequels, and I've liked them more that I've been going back and rewatching them.
Right.
But my biggest disappointment personally was that Thrawn didn't show up at all. Because I was, even as an Easter egg, like I was just,
we couldn't get Thrawn, maybe some Mara Jade in there.
Right? Like, oh my God, if they'd had both of those characters, my brain would have exploded.
Yeah, but. And I still think, because, they brought Thrawn back in Rebels in the cartoon.
Right.
And I think we'll see some of those characters pop up.
I hope so.
I
hope so.
Disney gets it a little bit, I think. They'll start, kind of trickling those out, I think.
Yeah, and I will happily take it in.
Yeah, absolutely. Bring it on. I got one more. You brought it up a little bit, but one of my favorite science fiction shows is Farscape. Which
nice.
Right, so he goes through the wormhole with that. Now, explain that to me, because you see it in so many different science fiction things, but are wormholes actually possible? Do we, go through a wormhole and end up somewhere else?
Yeah, so like warp drive, the theory is sound. It's this idea that you can connect 2 points in space-time with a sort of shortcut tunnel. That instead of thinking about it as one long flat plane, think about it as maybe crumpled up, folded over toilet paper or something like that.
Right.
And that you'd be able to punch holes to shortcut your way through that. Like mathematically, theoretically, it's totally sound. The issue is that geometrically, it does look like a black hole. And so we've never, because at some point your gravitational well is going to get so steep that it's hard for light to escape it. And so we've never been able to detect a wormhole if they are out there. And in science fiction, we see them being either naturally occurring or artificial. But it's that idea that you connect 2 points in space and time. There's actually also, there's a lot of great science fiction examples of wormholes, but because we brought up Voyager, there's the episode Eye of the Needle in the first season where they find the micro wormhole and that they discover that it's not just connecting them to the Alpha Quadrant, but it's also going back in time. So it's connecting 2 different points in time. And that's something that, a lot of science fiction doesn't necessarily go into. You do have things like Stargate that does, connect 2 points in space and time. It's the same concept.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that
Yeah.
that helps a little bit. It's you see that so much in different science fiction shows, and most of them don't really go, and especially if it involves time travel, because then
Yeah.
you get into all kinds of.
Oh yeah, it gets ugly real
Yeah.
fast. Yeah.
It gets a little slippery. I was the last, our normal Two Opinionated show. Brett and I get together and we just discuss, whatever's on our mind for that week, or if we go see a movie or whatever it is. But we were going through the timeline from Star Trek Nemesis to Star Trek Picard. So that time in between. And we got into that little rabbit hole about, when Spock's trying to save the Romulans and he accidentally, creates an alternative timeline.
Right. Yep, exactly. That then now a whole new movie. And it's actually a great example to show, like, that is a type of multiple universes too that have to do with time travel. That every time you travel through time, you spawn a new universe, a new timeline, which is basically what they did in the Star Trek films.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
All right. I said that I was done, but I got one more.
That's okay.
Every time you say something, I'm like, I don't know how much of a comic book reader you are, but
dabbled, but
okay.
Bring it on.
So multiverse.
Yes.
So especially with DC Comics, and they just did the television version of Crisis on Infinite Earths, which is basically all of these multiverses that get combined, into one, basically. So are multiverses, is that a possibility?
Yeah, so I have on my channel a 2-part series on multiverse theory, because there's lots of different types of multiple universes out there. And the ones that we see in comic books is usually this idea of infinite multiverses, that when the Big Bang happened, it expanded in infinite directions. This will start to give you a cluster headache real fast. But we expanded in infinite directions, and we only see sort of one cone that light has had time to reach us in. So we're kind of confined to that finite time from the Big Bang to our region where light could have traveled, because nothing is going to get outside of that. But then you have like all this other stuff out there that did expand. And so that's usually where that infinite multiverse theory comes from, is just you have this expansion that just went out in all these directions, starting from the same, like almost the same starting conditions, and you end up with multiple versions of people from all of those different multiverses.
Then you end up with the fun stuff.
Right, exactly. But then you get other multiverse theories, like that time travel one. You get one that I love that's like sort of scientific but not provable at all, which is this dripping black hole theory. This idea that supermassive black holes reach a critical mass and then they give birth to a black hole or to a universe in another dimension, and that dark energy is coming from matter falling into that mother black hole that's expanding this other universe. And so it's like it's black holes all the way down. So
that's kind of cool. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Does that have and I'm sure it doesn't, but they just came out with the black hole that they figured out had such an impact on the universe. Does that have anything to do with that?
In my mind, it does. Because that was the first thing I thought of. I was like, maybe that black hole did reach a critical mass.
Yeah,
they discovered it a few years ago, but I guess what came out recently was that they had proof that that's what had happened.
Right.
It sort of had it.
It's been theorized for a while, I guess.
Yeah, that it did have, like, basically create a crater in space-time.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, that was the Big Bang in a
like your
universe.
Theory. Yeah, that's kind of cool. When those type of scientific discoveries come out, I mean, do you geek out like some of us geek out when we get announcements for, comic books or a TV show or something?
It depends what it is. So a lot of, like, it's interesting because there's so much clickbait out there that a lot of scientific discoveries sometimes get sensationalized beyond what the actual discovery was.
Right.
So it always takes me a second to read or look into it to see how valid it is. But then things like that, absolutely. I mean, I have like the black hole tattooed onto me, the black hole picture,
Yeah.
the weird stuff with Beetlejuice that's been going on lately. Like
Yeah.
I've been keeping an eye on that. So I do geek out about space for sure, and still love following all the gravitational wave discoveries.
Yeah, that's amazing. What was I'll ask this now quick. What was your first tattoo?
Oh, my first tattoo.
I'll go completely off topic.
No, that was great.
I've seen you've got like a starship, right?
Yeah, I have a sleeve of starships. I've got Voyager there and
awesome.
Mass Effect. I wanted tattoos from about the age of 9, and but my parents did not want me to get them, and so it was like, when you're 16, we'll let you get a tattoo, and then that didn't happen, and then when I was 17, that didn't happen, and then when I was 18, it wasn't going to happen, and I was like, well, I'm 18 now, so we're just going to take care of this myself. So I actually got really small Irish and Scottish flags, because that's my mother and my father are Irish and Scottish. So I was like, at the very least, if it's too painful or I don't like it or I do grow out of it, as I was told, it's at least something that's never going to change about me, right? It's my heritage. But the one I got right after that was when the 6th Harry Potter book came out. I was I'm still a big Snape fan. He was my favorite character. And this was when the book came out. So we didn't know what was going to happen. And then at the end of the 6th book, when he killed Dumbledore, I mean, the hardcore Harry Potter fans went,
oh yeah.
I was so determined that he was good that I like saw through all of it. I'm like, no, he's a good guy. I got his name tattooed on my lower back. So I have a Severus Snape tattoo on my lower back. That's awesome. Which I'm just embracing. I'm owning, because it's just
you have to. You have to. I've always heard, and I don't have any tattoos myself, but I've always heard that it can be kind of addictive, and you get started and then you're like, ooh, now I want to do this one. And it just kind of goes from there.
It does. And for me, it's like a lot of them, like I wouldn't get that tattoo now, but it reminds me of what was important to me then and where I was in my life.
Moment in time.
Yeah. And there's a lot that I have that I would forget what it felt like, what I was going through if I didn't have that tattoo to remind me, those little weird moments in your life that seem so important at the time. And then 15 years later, they seem pretty inconsequential, but they really meant something to you. So
no, that's really cool. It's like a Facebook memory that you just happen to see in the mirror every once in a while.
That always stays with you. And you know what? I mean, you understand my personality instantly once you see all my tattoos. So
see, I think that's cool. I mean, if you're going to get some, you should get some that kind of express your personality. I think.
For sure.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been awesome. This is even better than I thought it was going to be.
Good. I'm so glad. This has been a pleasure.
And I've got so much to ask you about. I could go through so many different science fiction shows, but I won't. But
that's okay.
You have to come back at some point.
Deal. Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Before you go though, go through one more time where everybody can find you, and also. I know we're kind of in a lockdown. Brett and I were supposed to cover a convention in Lexington, Kentucky this past weekend that got postponed. Do you have any conventions coming up that you'll be appearing?
They're all up in the air right now. I had a whole bunch coming. So right now, basically everything's on hold. There's obviously a lot of still the big ones that are in August, September that are supposed to maybe still go on, but it's hard to commit to anything right now. But the easiest place for people to find me, like I mentioned, my website is drerinmac.com. It's drerinmac.com. And that's the same handle I use on Twitter and Instagram. So Dr. Erin Mac. And I also stream on Twitch under the same handle. And then my YouTube channel is Dr. Erin Explains the Universe. So you can find all that stuff there. Thank you.
Yeah. I definitely encourage everybody to go check that out. I got, talk about a rabbit hole. I got on some both of your sites, and it took up a big chunk of the day, but it was in a good way. It was all really great stuff. What's I know it's probably Mass Effects, but what's your game that you love to play?
Oh, Mass Effect. Yeah.
That's what I figured.
Yeah, I do. But I do love, I love turn-based combat and I love management simulators. So when I'm streaming on Twitch, that's a lot of them. So like I was streaming Civilization Beyond Earth earlier today and ones like that. So.
All right. That's cool. That's
It's
cool.
fun.
Well, thank you so much, and stay safe, and hopefully you get some fresh air soon.
Thanks. You too.
All right, Erin. We'll talk to you again really soon.
Sounds good. Thanks. Have a good one.
Bye. All right, I think I've got it paused. Let's see.